Hi, listeners. Welcome back to the podcast. Before we kick this one off, I sort of wanted to do a little shout out, say thank you all for listening. I've had some great feedback over the course of this season and last season. And if you guys are interested, it would be super helpful for me if you could head over to iTunes and leave a rating in the iTunes store and a comment or whatever. It's really helpful, helps push the podcast to more people and spread the word and keeps me being able to make more content for you guys. So enjoy the podcast. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. And with me today, I have Mr. James Cottingham of DK Engineering. Hi James.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, hello. So at the moment we're sitting in your office at DK. Can you sort of give the audience a little bit of an explanation of sort of who you are, where we are, what you guys do?
Sure. So we are an independent Ferrari specialist. We were established in 1977, founded by my parents. So DK is David and Kate, a business that was built up as a result of their passion for cars. So they had racing cars in the main in the 60s, and Dad had a normal day job at Kodak as a research physicist. He always tells a story about how he paid off the local newsagent to have every week's copy of Exchange and Mart delivered to him before anyone else, so he could make the phone call at 7 a.m. to find all the sort of cheapest Jaguars and things that he could buy, the best XK120s, as, before anyone else had seen the adverts. Would buy a car, would use the facilities at Kodak because they had a car club for all the employees. They had the different clubs, and there was a car club, and they had a fully equipped workshop with paint shop, trim shop, all that sort of stuff. So he'd buy a car and, in his evenings, do it up, restore it, whatever, sell it on for a profit and move on. And in the mid-70s, I think Mum and Dad were both sort of a bit bored of their day jobs and decided to set up a business. And at that time, they had recently bought and sold a few Ferraris in the same way.
So they're both car nuts.
Both car people. Yeah, I think they met as a result of Dad having nice cars and Mum liking cars and riding in his Mark 1 Jag that had a D-type engine fitted with side exhaust and that sort of stuff.
Nice.
And so they had recently bought and sold a few Ferraris and done quite well with it, and thought, well, this is a good mark to be associated with. I think Dad was bored of Jaguars because the engines are all very similar, and there wasn't much variety to them, and he'd sort of been there, done that. And there was so much Ferrari-wise out there that wasn't restored. Plus, at that time, there was only one other independent specialist in the UK, that was Graypool. Or David Clark Engineering, as it was at the time, before they were a main dealer and later became Graypool, the main dealer. Oh. So he saw a bit of a window, or they saw a bit of a window, started the business, and their thing was 50s sports Ferraris. So there were lots and lots of 50s sports Ferraris at that time that were there, lying in barns as sort of old race cars that, had engine blow-ups and were unrepairable or too difficult to repair. And he sort of enjoyed the challenge, had some really good guys working alongside him when he started the business. In fact, one of his apprentices at that time is one of our, not what I'd call a competitor, but has one of the most famous other Ferrari restoration shops in the UK is owned and run by his first apprentice, who worked with us until the mid-90s actually. And so it went from there, and they were restoring 50s sports Ferraris in the main, and obviously it was an incredible time for values of cars right up until the late 80s. They always talk about how they were buying and selling so much and restoring stuff for buying it for $100,000 and it was worth $1 million 10 years later after they finished the restoration. It was an incredible time for them, and they bought and sold a hell of a lot of cars. And if you go on the website barchetta.cc, which is a really sort of very unknown website but documents the histories of those early Ferraris very well, you will see Dad's name or our business's name a lot. And some of our biggest clients, have said to me over the years, one of the reasons I was drawn to DK is because, I was looking at all these great cars, whether it's a competition short wheelbase or a 250 Testarossa or something like that. And I just kept seeing these same names coming up, and it was either the owners or the people, the dealers that were associated with them, which was us. So that's where the business started. About in the mid-90s, my two older brothers came into the business, and I came into the business in the early noughties in 2002, but did mechanical engineering at university for 4 years as well. And our sales side of the business really grew in the mid-90s because by that time we had such great knowledge of the cars and the people, and knew where the cars were. And I think at that time that's where our love for F40 started. That was sort of 4 or 5 years after the point in time where the cars went from being £1 million to £100,000 overnight. And there were lots of guys that had hung on to these cars for 5 years thinking, would it ever be $1 million again? It wasn't. It wasn't going to happen soon. actually took 20 years and, or more than 20 years, actually, 25 years, I guess. So we started buying and selling a lot of cars. And it was in 2005 or 6 that we really made the decision that we really needed to focus more on sales than the workshop side of things. So we moved to our current site here, which is an old farm that we quite famously restored because it was the first time anyone had sort of restored a farm to this specification, I think, in terms of our workshop was super high tech and along the lines of a main dealer Ferrari network dealership at that time with the kind of ramps we had and the in-floor exhaust systems and stuff like that. But also to have this very quaint setup of offices.
You have in-floor exhaust systems?
Yeah, so our extraction systems for the exhaust fumes when you're running cars up in the workshop is hidden in the floor. So you open a hatch and you pull out the tube and put it on the car. Whereas in the past, it was always from the ceiling. And it was just, we wanted it to be very state-of-the-art, very clean and very, we had realised at that point in time that we were storing a lot of cars by then. We were selling a lot of cars. We were restoring. We were also servicing modern cars. And there was a real window for the complete service. And you'll see that when we talk about what we're doing on Instagram, things like that, we really sort of bang that drum of the complete service. And I've noticed that other dealers in the world of late have started talking about the cars that they're restoring, which I always find quite amusing and flattering because they are, going to have a look at the restoration that the bills are going through their business, but it's nothing to do with them. And they're taking some photos every now and again and probably not really giving any technical input. Maybe they've got a good eye for detail,
but they're handling
but they're not really giving it any technical input. Yes, we don't do paint and trim here, but we do manage the process from start to finish. And the guys at the trim shop and the guys at the metal workshop, we review their work periodically and we point them in the right direction detail-wise. So at that time, we realised that it was very important that we should really expand the business so that we could look after all these different aspects. And that's why, again, today you see quite a lot of non-Ferraris on our website because we're buying and selling those cars for our clients. And generally the modern car stock that you'll see on our website is either a part exchange or something that we're selling for an established client. Yeah. I think if someone phones me up today and says, will you sell a 360 Spider for me? I will say, quite frankly, I don't think we're best placed to do that because we don't have a list of guys looking for those cars. Yeah. And we're probably a bit too expensive for that. But if you wanted to sell a Challenge Stradale, which is a limited production, lightweight special car, we probably do have a list of guys for that. And we would probably get the best result because of the all-encompassed service that we provide and what people are looking for and our long-term projection and objectives when it comes to looking after clients. So, it's been the last, since 2008 or 9, it's been an amazing time. The business has continued to grow. I think I lose track of how many cars exactly we have in our care, but it's somewhere in the region of, I always used to say 250, but it is a lot more than that. And it is frankly, must be today 350 cars that are in our care. You've just been to the store.
Yeah, we were just on the full tour.
We've done all the showrooms. We've got all the cars in the workshop. Plus, we've got a collection of 100 cars that we look after for one other client who has his own building close by that we manage.
Nice.
And 10 miles away, we have another store with 40 or so cars in that are much longer term storage. So, it's a massive undertaking. Yeah. And, we've got a great team here of people that do their different bits and pieces, which has been the other part that's been difficult in recent years, but we have really got right of late, I think, is having the guys that run the servicing side of the business, the guys that run the storage side of the business, the guys that, are major parts of the sales business, and everyone working together and getting along and understanding the protocols and processes, which, the values are so high today that the guys that own these cars actually are probably, better served letting us just handle everything for them so they can get on with their day job.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully make some more money to buy the next.
Is getting staff, is that quite difficult now? Because you need people with a certain set of skills and things.
Yeah, it's really tough. On the workshop side of things, I think that we get our best staff from guys that have been elsewhere for a while and have specialised in a field and then have decided they want to go elsewhere and specialise, learn about the sort of the broader spectrum of things, which is what we offer. And those guys, they'll be really good at a particular brand or a particular age of car, and they'll come here and we'll round off their skill set and hopefully, they'll stay here. Because, as we walked through the workshop, you saw everything from 355 through to, 2 or 3 F40s.
There's just...
To total restoration of Dino and a total restoration of Alusso and all sorts of things like that, to the ProDrive 550. There's all sorts going on.
There's just
here.
a ton of really cool cars when you come and have a look around. Just it's a collection of loads of buildings, all sort of very similar inside, but a whole bunch of just different stuff. And then it's funny, you walk around and you see, I don't know how many F40s we've seen today. A lot of F40s.
It must be close to 20.
Probably something
I know
like
there's
20.
14 in the store, and I think there's one in the showroom, or outside the showroom at the moment. And I think there was 4 in the workshop, so that would be 19. So it's a decent number.
It's funny, and they're all, well, actually they're not all red, but they're pretty much all red. And actually we got to the point of distinguishing, like, how do you, when you end up with so many cars that are so similar, how do you distinguish between the values of those cars? And it starts to get down to really, we were saying like mileage becomes the distinguishing feature, or like one has a cat, one doesn't have a cat, all that sort of stuff. Whereas looking from here, we've got a competition Daytona.
Yeah, we've got a competition Daytona, which is one of only 25 cars that are accepted by Ferrari as period comp cars. 15 of those were built by Ferrari, 10 were converted from road cars by independents. That's one of the 10 that was converted. Very hard to value. I mean, when you look at the list of owners of the 15 factory cars, pretty much, I think half of them own 250 GTOs as well.
Okay.
So they're really special cars because they're the last of that breed of, drive it to the racetrack, race it, and drive it home again.
And in my eyes, they are so much cooler than the normal road car.
Oh, I mean, I hate Daytonas as a road car. Hate's a strong word, but it's one of the last cars.
You're not a massive fan.
I've just never enjoyed one. I've never enjoyed driving one. I've never enjoyed selling one. A bit like Lamborghinis, as you got the impression earlier on. I understand Lamborghinis and they're for people, but they're not for me.
Yeah.
And that's down to personal experience. It's not necessarily a reflection of a stereotype or anything. It's just I've had bad experiences with Lamborghinis. Daytona's the same, but comp Daytonas, I've had a lot of fun with comp Daytonas. Some of my earliest childhood memories of going up the motorway with Dad in the comp Daytonas that we restored in the 90s. And in recent years, I've done 2 or 3 big rallies in a comp Daytona and had so much fun with them. And as you say, they're just so much better looking than a standard car.
Yeah, so much cooler.
Yeah.
There's something a little bit sort of like Japanese JDM about them.
Yeah. And quite sinister as well, with the big arches. They're very max power, but it works. Really works.
No, it's very cool. Yeah, so what's like day to day? What's most stuff? Are you having cars in for service, restorations, and then selling the odd car for clients? How does it sort of split? Are you a full mix of everything?
My time?
Well, just here at DK.
And
then also you personally.
I mean, so the workshop is flat out the whole time. We probably book on average between 3 and 5 weeks ahead for service work. The blend of retail versus sales work is about 60% retail, 40% sales.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, the more cars we buy and sell, the more we need to prepare them, the more we inspect, the more we do work as part of a sale. I think that's one of the downfalls of having a workshop and a sales outfit is obviously everything that we sell has to go through the workshop. I mean, we want it to. It's expected of us, but we want it to. When jobs go wrong, we end up paying for it. You can imagine a dealer that doesn't have a workshop, if he sends his F40 to another independent specialist to have the fuel tanks change and they have to take them out again because they're leaking, he doesn't get charged any extra.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, okay, this job's cost 16,000 as opposed to 14,000, but we'll wear the 2,000. Whereas here, I end up paying that extra 2,000, which does get you down. But what I can take away from it is that we can stand by every single car that we sell.
And every car, you've checked, you've driven,
and because we do it so often, every single car and different models go in and out of the workshop. Of course, there's a pinch of salt you have to take with all these things, especially the older the cars get. There are certain things that you say, okay, we understand that, we accept that. This needs attention. This needs to be monitored going forwards. We sign that off. We're the ones that say we're happy for that to have been left or for that to be looked at next year. But so the workshop is flat out the whole time. Sales wise, we sell around about 100 cars a year.
Yeah.
Which that was the average number, but I think actually today we probably sell more like 125, 130 a year, which considering there's just 2 of us really doing sales, Harvey Stanley and myself. Sorry, that's one name, Harvey Stanley.
Okay, it sounds like 3 people.
Yeah, no, Harvey Stanley and myself, James Cottingham. And then we have 2 guys who work with us in the sales department, making sure that the whole process is rounded in terms of from the check-in of the sales car to make sure, log what's there, log what prep's required, to when we've sold the car, making sure everything we've agreed to do is done. It's quite a lot. We are really busy with sales, and actually our quarter up to the end of February was one of our best for 10 or so. So we've had a really good run of late. And it all comes down to all the events we do, going worldwide. You sort of make notes of what people are looking for, or what people want to sell and what they have. And, whilst we have our stock list, we also do a hell of a lot of deals where we're just putting A and B together. Yeah. And that's really nice. That's really satisfying for us, because obviously it's low risk for us. There's no investment apart from all the thousands we spend on travel and advertising. But
quite a lot of that you're driving cars.
Yeah, but that's a very serious part of it. Someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it. Yeah. So we can get in these race cars and whatnot.
I have to say the calendar has become so full. The last 2 years, I've really noticed it. I've been doing this, well, as I said, since 2002, but absolutely full time since 2008. The last 2 years, you've really noticed that there's always 2 more concours events. There's always 1 more rally. There's always 1 more auction. There's just so much going on that obviously we're recording this in the middle of March, and
everything's about to get cancelled.
The world around us seems to be falling apart because of a virus. But the one thing I will take away from that at the moment is that suddenly I'm not away every weekend, which is
that's quite nice,
quite refreshing in a way. Although, it would be nice to be going racing and doing all those things. And obviously yesterday we had the Tour Auto postponed until September for the time being, and the same with the Patrick Peter race meeting at Paul Ricard.
Do you try and get to most of the most events throughout the year? And obviously there's tons and tons and tons of stuff. What are your go-to major events of the year? So if you picked let's say
I think you've got to work on a 2-year basis.
Okay.
Because obviously Monaco Historic and Le Mans Classic, I think you've got to go to those events, which are every other year. Therefore, Villa d'Este we tend to go to every other year.
Yeah.
And when we're not going to Monaco, we'll go to Villa d'Este, which is a fabulous event and, very special. Pebble Beach, for us, we have to be there every year. We do great business there. And, we always take a car there, or take part in something, from not only a dealer point of view, but an enthusiast point of view.
Yeah.
Often we'll have cars in the auctions too. We make sure that we go to the members meeting and the Revival Goodwood point of view, and possibly the Festival Speed, but probably the Festival Speed every other year. And then we'll focus on a particular race series, I think. So this year, very much, we were going to focus on the Peter Auto Series, because it's very European central. And, obviously I've seen you at the race meetings we did go to last year with, I think they've done a great job of pulling in all different types of racing cars. There's such good variety when you go to those race meetings that people can go and...
It's just the coolest bunch of cars.
Yeah. Yeah, and totally. And I think, I actually think Ron Maiden of Masters got this first. He realised that guys are busy. So if they're going to go racing 5 or 6 weekends a year, you need to put on, the different race series that you have on your calendar at each race meeting.
Yeah.
They need to be there together so that someone can buy a car for that race, a car for that race, and a car for that race.
I didn't realise this was a thing.
And people go and so they go to one weekend and they do 3 races. So they do 3 times free practice sessions, 3 qualifying sessions, and 3 races in 3 different cars, and get the most out of their weekend. And they're not sitting idle, being away from the family for only 4 or 5 weekends, as opposed to going to 15 different race meetings to race 3 different cars. Patrick Peter, in recent years, has really done very well. Taking on board the 2-litre Cup with the 911s.
That's done very well.
I mean, it's a great race series, and actually Harvey did it for 2 years before I had to go last year. And he kept coming back and saying, "Oh, it's amazing." And I just thought, it's just a 911. How can it be that good? And then last year I went to Hungary and had a go with John Bennett, who's a very good mate of mine, Andrew Smith's stepfather. In qualifying, I was a bit frustrated. First time in the car, and it was a bit wet, and just thought, this is not everyone's running to the same rules here. You can certainly see that different cars are different. And then I started the race, and by the end of lap 3 or 4, I think I was in 3rd position, and ended up having a great race with Mark Sumpter, who won the championship eventually, and Mike Jordan, who's obviously, both of those guys have raced Porsches forever. It's the first time I'd ever raced a Porsche. And it was the first time in a long time that I got out of a car, not, surprised at how hot and sweaty I was,
Yeah.
but also just with a grin
Like
from
buzzing.
ear to ear, and it was just such close racing. And every moment that you came off the throttle, you were kicking yourself because you thought, why have I done that? And it took me back to my early days of racing FIA MGBs. That's what it was like.
Yeah.
They were 150 horsepower, 950 kilo, 1965 MGBs, and it was very close, tight racing. And I started that with Ollie Bryant and a guy called Tom Smith, who still races them, who is the king of MGBs. And Rob Huff was doing it at that time, and it was really good racing. And that was back in 2002, 2003. That was really good racing. The 911s took me back to that. But there's something quite nice about a 5-speed gearbox, and it's a 1965 Porsche 911. Somehow that sort of simple combination works really well, and no one turns their nose up to it, apart from me 2 years ago, but I don't anymore.
I think that's one of the things, isn't it? Until you go out and race in a really close series or something like that, or because you get some categories where there's such a spread of cars, and as much as that interests me in the sense of I like certain cars and certain, whether it's the Porsches or the Ferraris or whatever, and you pick your camp and they all race against each other, they're not the same speed. And racing in a class where, in theory, all of these cars are the same speed, the racing is so much better, although they're not all the same speed.
Yeah, it definitely is. And don't get me wrong, a one make race series is a cool thing, but also actually when you look at your TTs of the world, when you've got Cobra versus GTO
cool.
versus E-Type, that's really cool. And just to see where certain cars are stronger than others. But it's quite refreshing to see that in historic motorsport, a one make series, because it didn't exist. It really didn't in the 60s. That didn't exist. And so we've never seen that before. We've always had races within races. So it's really good when you then get 35 or 40 of these cars together and you see the spread. Yeah. And it really, it separates the men from the boys.
Yeah, you can't just use you've got 400 more horsepower or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just in a little lightweight load sedan or whatever. It's an even playing field. So that race series is great. And I think the other thing that Patrick Peters really nailed is the I always get the name wrong, so I apologise to Jarrah in advance, but I think it's now called Global Endurance Legends.
It's Endurance Racing Legends.
It's Endurance Racing Legends.
It was called the Global Endurance Legends.
Yeah. Right. Fine. So
but that group, so that's 90s and 2000s Le Mans cars.
And that's great, and for whatever reason, the Europeans have seemed to gone more for the GT1 and GT2 cars, which, the prototypes haven't been so popular in that. And I went to Spa last year with the Dallara and had quite a lonely time. But the size of that grid now with the GT1 and GT2 cars, it's amazing.
I think that's what Jarrah's he's tried to get more GT and GT1 cars.
Yeah.
And I think, all of them are just awesome. Like the Dallara you've got sounds unbelievable. And then you see all the Ferraris, likewise the Ferrari and all these V12 Astons, and then the old Lambo and, Maserati or whatever. It's just, for me, who I would say is relatively new to being enthusiastic about this sort of event, the 90s and 2000s stuff is just unbelievable. And I'm slowly getting more accustomed to the older stuff. And
it changed so quickly because it went from 80s, early 90s Group C, which was they were just pure prototype, real, man's cars, to softer prototypes, to GT cars. When in '95 when McLaren won with the F1 at Le Mans, it was because it was a damp race, I think, but still it was a great car. GT1 had that massive sort of surge until it went away. I think
disappeared.
The CLK GTR put an end to it, but it then went back to prototypes. If you remember, then it was suddenly the Audi R8, and then it was the Bentley, and then it was the later whatever the Audis were, and then the Porsche. So it was very much prototypes. And I'm quite excited about the talk of those sort of super hypercars coming back to Le Mans. But I think the one problem that everyone's overlooking at the moment is that the cost of a new hypercar is so high that who on earth is going to put the money up to buy one of those to go racing? And
I think that's the problem, because Aston have pulled out of racing at Le Mans with the Valkyrie. And I remember hearing, they're trying. I didn't realize this was a thing, but they pre-sell the cars, or some people do, pre-sell their race cars to customers. So they're like, will you buy a Valkyrie race car for €4.5 million? And in 4 years' time, when we're finished racing with it, you will get a new ish Valkyrie
that
race
may
car
have won its class.
that may or may
Yeah.
not have done anything, but we want the money now, and you
Yeah.
won't get it for a bunch of years. And then
It's quite difficult to know when to get onto that train, isn't it? Like before they've done their first test, before they've had the balanced performance given to them. Yeah, it's definitely in recent years something I've heard of a lot, especially with the general GT cars like 458s and 488s. I've heard a lot of people, fronting the money basically and saying, I will buy the car after the race. But yeah, that is the problem with the hypercar thing. I just think the initial value is just, it's unobtainable.
it's big, and it's obviously running something like that.
Yeah,
It's going to be huge.
And people say to me, are you worried about racing historic cars and their values? Yeah, absolutely. But we don't race them at 10/10ths.
Yeah.
And that is not in the back of your mind, but it's programmed into you when you jump.
At all?
Of course, yes, it is. As you're going across the grass backwards, you think about it. But no, yeah.
No, I mean, like, you're saying you don't race like flat out.
Are
you like a notch?
It's before
Consciously a notch
It's
down.
before you get in the car. You know what you're getting into, and you race it at a certain speed. So, certain cars you will make a move. Actually, certain cars, certain race meetings, and certain events, you will drive to a different level than you will elsewhere. Goodwood, I am 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
And that's a really difficult one, Goodwood, because it's so high profile now that you want to do well there because you want people to see you doing well, to maybe drive their cars in the future. And it is actually really good for business. People laugh that it's you get to race these cars.
Yeah.
But it's really good for business because people call me up and they say, you don't know me, but I've seen you on the TV.
Yeah.
I've seen you, at Goodwood in the paddock. I'd like to buy a TT car, or I'd like you to sell my car because you
clearly seem to be into this and know what
familiar.
you're doing.
Yeah, and it's a big part, isn't it? I think if you're buying and selling old cars, you've got to actually be able to offer real advice as opposed to something that you've heard from someone else. It has to be first-hand advice. Maybe that's why I don't like Lamborghinis that much, because whenever I've driven Lamborghinis, I've always been terribly disappointed.
Yeah.
We were talking about another 911 based car. I think that's the same sort of thing. That I've jumped in them and wanted them to be really good. I've jumped in an SV Miura and thought I really want this to be good, and then it's not. And so that's why I'm not the best place to offer advice on those particular cars.
An LP 640 recently with an E-gear or whatever, and it was one of the worst things I've ever been in. But equally, I'm not in the mindset. I think you have to have a certain mindset. Like, you approach a car with how you think it should be. And if you approach, like saying you were saying earlier, if you drive an old car and you think it's going to be like a new car, like if you drive a 70s 911 and expect it to be like a modern GT3 RS, it's not. So you need to dispel that myth.
Although, unless you've driven a 3-litre RS, which is mind-blowing. If you ever jump into a 1974 3-litre RS, especially having driven a 2.7 RS just beforehand, you cannot believe there's only a year between.
Significant difference.
It's unbelievable. And you think you're in a 964. It's that good. But yeah, that's a side piece.
I know someone who bought one maybe a year ago, and he was very, very happy.
Yeah.
I love the 2.8 RSR.
Yeah.
But a lot of people like the 3 litres.
I think the thing about the 3-litre is just so obviously different.
Yeah.
If you put it next to the 2.7 and you say this is the car it replaced, obviously 2.8's in between, but that was for racing purposes, as the 3-litre was. But the 3-litre there was a road version. Or rather, they were all basically road cars that you could race. When you put them next to each other, it's so radically different.
It's so different.
And I guess it's the difference between, in a really weird way, a 355 and a 360. They were so different, weren't they? And there's a year between them. That's what the 2.7 versus the 3 litres like. Although, the 3-litre, it's just, as I said, you jump out of it and you think that could be a 964. Just so different. Yeah, but great cars.
It's funny that.
Anyway, we got sidetracked.
Yeah, we have. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is restorations. And I imagine a lot of owners will, first of all, like, what is the process for a restoration of a car? Like vaguely. If I came to you and said, right, I want a nut and bolt restoration of whatever, I don't know.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head there with the first comment, because you've said nut and bolt. That, in my mind, that is the only way to restore a car.
Okay.
Now and again, we get pulled into the awkward situation of having to half restore a car.
Right.
So by that I mean, for example, 275 GTB,
Yeah.
and you take it back to bare metal, and you take the engine out, and you take the gearbox out, and you restore those bits, and you repaint it, but you don't actually take it back to a bare shell.
Right.
And I think people think that they're saving money to get the same result, but they're not, because you'll look at that car afterwards, and it's just not a fully restored car, and you can tell it immediately.
Yeah.
And it's something I really don't want to do. And Dad and I are very much of that opinion in this business. But obviously, when we do have a workshop to feed. You can't turn work away. And today, labour costs, the cost of running a business, parts, so much more. A full restoration of a 250 of some description is a £400,000 plus restoration today. That's a lot of money.
It is.
Plus the VAT.
Is a restoration of any car a similar amount of money? Like, in terms of like the sliding scale, I often hear like, okay, so-and-so wants to restore X, but actually there's basically no point, because unless they've got loads of money and they specifically want to restore that car, you basically don't gain much value by restoring it. Whereas there'll be cars that you can restore, and the restoration in itself, you get more than that back when you sell it. Are there many cars where that's the case, or generally it's just the owner would like it looking new?
I would say that there aren't, the only time that you have, well, let me rephrase that. I would say that those cases are rare, and it generally would be a higher value car that also somehow you're putting it right.
Okay.
So an example may be that it doesn't have its original engine anymore, but you manage to reunite it with it, and during the course of a restoration you do that. Or at some point, again using the 275 as an example, a short nose 275, at some point in the late 60s, early 70s, someone put a long nose on it to make it look like the more desirable later car. Funnily enough today that, some people prefer a short nose, and I do actually.
Yeah.
I think a short nose is the pure original form. I love the look of them. So you might put it back to short nose as part of a restoration, and therefore add some value, because beforehand everyone said, oh, the problem with that car is, whereas
it's a modified whatever.
You eliminate that. You put it back to standard, back to correct spec. That can make sense. But in terms of straight restoration, because it needs a restoration, is there value in buying a car that needs restoration and then doing the restoration and the outcome is more value? Really very rare, very rare. And mainly because a restoration will always cost more than you think.
Yeah.
And that's why you can't accurately price a restoration, especially on a Ferrari, because they're complicated in terms of their construction. It's very, very difficult to accurately price a restoration to within 50,000.
Which sounds so
crazy.
vague.
But once the car is stripped, to a bare shell, and then the engine's been stripped and the body's been blasted and stripped, then from that point forwards we can say, okay, these are the obstacles and the surprises we've got, and we can price it from there. But then again, Ferraris are higher value cars, so it's a little bit more forgiving.
With expensive cars, yeah.
But I often, when I'm walking around with people here, I explain that the beauty of a Ferrari is that you restore it. Whereas if you were restoring a Jaguar or a Aston Martin from the 60s, you'd be amazed at how much of the restoration is replacement parts.
Right.
Throughout the car. The same with the 911, actually. A 911, and a 911 is simpler to restore because it's so easy to pull apart. The engine and gearbox you can literally drop out in a few hours, or probably less. Yeah. I think Tuthill can do it in 12 minutes or something ridiculous. And then you get it back to a bare shell and you can blast or dip the complete shell in one go. Whereas a Ferrari, it's a long process getting the engine out and getting the gearbox out and stripping the suspension off. On the Porsche, the rear drivetrain comes out as one. You've just got all your sort of link arms and things. And then, if it's a later Ferrari with fiberglass floors, then you've got to separate those from the shell itself. And then there's no parts on the shelf body part wise. Whereas a 911, if you need new wings, you buy them and you fit them. That's where the savings are. So it's, and going back to the point I made about the cost of restoration these days is so much more. There is a very short supply of Ferrari parts, but then again, you don't need them. You've got to restore them. But then that comes down to hours. When you say you're not replacing, you're restoring, what does that involve? Does that mean you're welding on new bits and reforming and stuff like that? It's really, it comes down to the mechanical components. So you might, a good example is on a Ferrari, you may restore the suspension in its entirety in terms of the wishbones, the shock absorber, the uprights. They'll be crack tested and all that sort of stuff. And you'll replace the bearings and the parts that wear out. But on a Jaguar or an Aston Martin or a Porsche, you'll replace a lot more of those parts with a part that's readily available on the shelf and is the fraction of the cost of restoring the equivalent Ferrari part, because you've got to put 20 hours in.
Yeah.
20 hours, that could be somewhere between £1,500 and £2,000, whereas the replacement part from Porsche is 260 quid.
Yeah.
I mean, those are not accurate numbers, but
that's the idea.
Sort of understand. And again, with a Jaguar E-Type, for example, there are so many parts of the body shell that are available. So, you may have rotten sills, rotten floors. You can buy, even the bulkhead. You can buy the bulkhead and then fit it into the tub as it's being restored. If you had to go that far with a Ferrari, it's very, very expensive. And it comes down to the way in which they were manufactured. And I think when people see we didn't actually talk about it, but in one of the showrooms we walked past a rolling chassis of a 50s Ferrari.
Yeah. When
people see that, they say, "What is that?" And you say, "It's a 250 Tour de France rolling chassis," and they're shocked because they don't realise, and they're sort of like, "Well, where are the floors?" Well, they come later, because the body goes on and then the floors go in and they're fitted and they're welded in. And then if you were restoring it, you'd have to take all those out. So it's a much bigger job than when you just look at a 911 shell or an E-Type shell
that gets redone, dipped, whatever. Yeah,
it's a really different thing. But I think that's why Ferrari was so successful racing, because they had these really strong, rugged cars that had a good, reliable engine and just went the distance. It wasn't necessarily about being technically the best car. It really was, as Enzo said, it was about the engine, and it was about being strong and reliable and getting to the end of the race. And we're lucky that we've restored other cars as well, and you see other cars when they come apart, and Ferrari really did it right, I think. And it's not always about being technically the best car. It's about having the right idea on balance.
Do you work all the way up to the modern cars?
Yes, so we see everything except stuff these days that's 7 years old or newer.
Okay.
Because all of that stuff has free servicing and 5-year warranties now from Ferrari, which suits us actually. It's that's a great system for us. And as I understand, for the main dealers, it's not such a good system. It's very difficult for them to earn their money back. So that gives us a stop point for the workshop, which is useful.
Which is rolling.
Yeah, and I think actually the main dealers pay more attention to the older cars now than they did. Yeah. I think before it was very much that as soon as they're out of warranty, they weren't really interested. But obviously the big saving grace for us is our labour rate's so much lower. Yeah. Even our labour rate, which is expensive in comparison to other historic car specialists from other parts of the industry, other brands, compared to a Ferrari main dealer, we are, significantly less. But sales-wise, we'll sell anything Ferrari-wise from 47 up to 2020.
Yeah. I was having a little dig through your Instagram, and I have to applaud you, actually, for taking the effort and time to employ actual photographers, namely Mr. Penfold, actually, to take good photos of cars. And now, your Instagram feed looks very nice, and it's got all these great pictures of all these cars that you've sort of sold over the last, period of time. Whereas most people don't seem to appreciate. Have you noticed a difference between going that extra mile?
I'm not really sure I should admit it, because then all our competitors might copy us.
Yeah, but they're probably not going to listen to this podcast.
I think Instagram's a really funny thing, and it's a great thing, by the way, and it has changed our business in recent years. It all started, I can't even remember how long ago it was, but I guess it was, if I scroll back to the first photo on our Instagram feed, 7 years ago. And it was my girlfriend at the time. She had Instagram, and she was talking about it, and people were getting on it. And I thought, well, actually, what people like to see is pictures of nice cars, and our website. When you have a website, you can't just put pictures, interesting pictures on. I think
on the front page.
Blogs were kind of going in that way, but as you say, on the front page, it's on the front page of the site. It's that's your front of house. Instagram's this really nice way of showing people behind the scenes, but also showing them what you want them to see. But actually, and I think a lot of businesses would do that, what you see on our Instagram is real. That is the way we work, and we we have a policy here with our employees that you're allowed to post on Instagram pictures of what's going on at work and what you've seen. as long as you've seen it on our Instagram or our website.
Okay.
So, there was a certain Enzo downstairs that we saw earlier that I wouldn't want anyone to see was here, but I haven't posted it, so no one else will.
Yeah. That's a good policy.
And it works, because obviously my parents are petrified, it's sort of, it's client confidentiality. It's how do we deal with this? It's something scary. It's something we really don't understand. I notice that they have Instagram accounts because suddenly I have like 15 likes from DCOT, something or other. And, they're definitely having a look. But it all started from that. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And it got to the point where about a year ago, I realized that I need to log all these messages that I get via Instagram on our CRM, because I hadn't been up until then. And I was thinking, all these people that are actually genuinely interested in cars. And, everyone is on there. Everyone is on there. But people are more conspicuous than others. And that, for me, that was a bit of a worry because about 2 years ago, my best friend's fiance said to me, who on earth are XXX, a certain other business? Yeah. And I said, well, they do what we do, sort of, but why do you ask? And they said, they followed me on Instagram. And I realised it's because in the early days, obviously, I followed my close friends first, and then it was following clients and things like that. And someone had gone to who we were following
and followed them,
and just followed every single person. So I sort of had a bit of a cull and protected, because you've got to
friends,
protect
family,
contacts.
whatever, or people and stuff.
But it's amazing. We'll put cars on Instagram and people will see it immediately and phone up. We were talking about the Carrera GTs that we've had of late. All of those cars or the Carrera GTs we sold this year, we sold 3 cars within a week of advertising them, and every single one, the first point of contact was Instagram.
Yeah,
it's powerful.
Huge.
It's so powerful. But going back to the photographers, I was always sort of posting photos, but they were a bit samey.
Yeah,
and I didn't want it to be samey. I wanted to give it a bit of a new dimension. And as we started this chat, our business was started by enthusiasts who wanted to help out other enthusiasts who wanted to still love and enjoy the cars, and it's a family. We have 20 cars of our own, and, the racing we do is for enjoyment as well. And the concours events we go to are for enjoyment and all that stuff we do. So it goes very well hand in hand with that. And, I think seeing the cars in motion is an important thing. And the relationship that we have with Alex, has gone back a long way. I remember, and obviously Luke, who works with us here, one of our first open days in 2008. I like to think that we invented these sort of open days and cars and coffee things because it was a way to drum up business.
Yeah, for sure.
In 2008, we had just moved here. We'd spent a lot of money on the premises and the phone didn't ring because of the credit crunch.
Yeah.
And in the March of 2009, we said, how can we generate some service work? And one of the Ferrari Owners Club guys said, you should get everyone over to see your premises because they're fabulous.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else like this out there. So we did, and it grew and grew. And I remember that first day, Luke and Alex came along, and it was before spotting and stuff like that. But they were just really keen guys, and they came and did bits and pieces for us over the years. And so as part of Luke being with us, and that's Luke Gilbertson, better known as You're Not My Father, spelt wrong, on Instagram. As part of him being here, I was sort of trying to grow that side of getting out to the newer generation of buyers and collectors. We've worked with Alex a lot more, and it's been really good. And obviously we've done a lot with GF Williams in the past, and other guys that come as a result of Classic Driver, Tom Shaxton. He's followed a number of restorations for us. Working with a new guy at the moment on some restorations, only because he's local, so he can just pop in at the drop of a hat. Scott Patton, who's really talented photographer as well, and unfortunately not done a great deal with you, I'm afraid.
No, that's all right.
But but it's always come from introductions.
Yeah.
And, it's a great way to get young people into the industry. I think that's the other thing I've always been keen on is sort of the next generation. Where do these guys come from? And
I think
the guys that like cars and spotted cars 5-10 years ago are some of the best photographers we have in the industry now.
Yeah, totally.
And
that passion, like building that passion in young people. Like there's so many super passionate young people. And there's quite a lot of companies that are really closed doors. Like they sort of try and pretend they don't exist almost. And they're a bit iffy about letting you come and have a look round and all that. And, fast forward some years, the companies that are approachable and seem like nice people and let anyone, come and have a look round. Obviously you don't want 100 million people all the time, but showing these cool cars to younger people. And the one I always talk about is like, let's say modern dealerships. The Lamborghini dealership in South Kent, which is just down the road from me, historically, you have to buzz to get in. And a lot of dealerships, you have to buzz to get in, even though they're on the high street, which stops 99% of people. I think most people get to that barrier and go like,
I feel like we've given Lamborghini a really hard time here.
Ferrari are the same. Like all of the dealerships, quite often it's a really like uninviting atmosphere.
I think, this could open a complete new topic, but I think the future of showrooms on the high street or in prominent areas is very bleak.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons. It really should be, about the people that want to come and have a look as opposed to the passers-by. And it's so difficult to differentiate between that. So I feel for those guys in that situation. And I had a friend that worked at JD Classics when they had their Mayfair showroom. And he was a really talented salesman. He'd been at many other places. He's in business on his own now. And I remember him saying to me, I'm just fed up with being a curator.
Yeah.
1 in 20 people that comes in. And they were on, I can't remember what it's called now, just behind the Connaught. So it was a link street. It wasn't on a main street, but he said the number of people that just come in and are frankly, a waste of time when we're in business to sell cars, not be a museum. It was a problem. And I think that comes back to the photographers again. One of the reasons that I've really pushed that of late and across the business and with the restorations as well, is so that people can, through Instagram, have a look inside our business, but without having to come and see us. And I'm not saying that we don't show everyone round. And last year we had to adopt a policy that I would say every day someone emails on the website and says we would like to come and have a look round. And people are very good about it. And they say, look, I'm not going to come and buy a car. I'd just like to come and have a look round. What we do now is we do a draw. So we say to people, every 6 months we're going to do a draw. We'll probably have between 5 and 10 people, and it'll be pulled out of a hat. And after that, it's reset. And if you weren't lucky enough to be pulled out of the hat,
and you do an open day every now and then.
Do again. Yeah, open days. We don't do the big open days anymore because they just got out of control. Yeah. So we will have 3 or 4 select Saturday morning coffee mornings for between 30 and 50 people. So supercar driver come, have a meet here once. We're doing one with Ferrari Owners Club. We're doing one with Jeremy Jackson Sittner, who runs like a car rally thing. And they're going to come and have a morning here in the same way. So we try and do those. But one of the unfortunate things of our business setup, having not all the showrooms on one site, is obviously we don't have everything here.
Yeah.
I'd love to have everything here, but because we're so close to London, the green belt makes it very difficult to build stuff. And it actually, from a sales point of view, it works quite well because you can give someone the full tour. And then you'll often find someone will say, that first showroom we went to, that Lamborghini, can I go and have a look? I mean, I'm saying Lamborghini because I feel sorry that we've been a bit harsh. This does happen, by the way. We do sell Lamborghinis, so I'm not against it. Can I go and have a look at that again?
Yeah.
And we will, and that works quite well. Whereas if you think
they
about
get time to mull over it a bit.
Whereas if you put someone in a showroom that has 40 cars in, they try and look at what unless you can look at one by one, it's very difficult to take in all the information, and you'll miss half the cars.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you'll be in the car driving home with your mate, and they'll say, "Did you see that really nice 16M?"
Yeah.
And I said, "I didn't even notice it." Whereas when you split it,
it is quite nice the way the buildings are sort of set up. You've got to sort of walk through one building into another, into another.
It's a journey.
And it's like, you can only take in 4 cars at a time or something. And, you show me around, you can tell me a little bit of story about each one and you get a little bit of information. But totally, you walk into a massive showroom where there's 100 cars in one room. You're just like, but.
Yeah, it's super impressive for a photo. But to actually take that in, and, we're great friends with the guys that run Salon Privé. And one of the things I said to them last year is, the really good thing about Pebble Beach is you can, in your head, treat it like a supermarket and you can go down each aisle.
Yeah.
Whereas you guys have got it completely jumbled up. And I was there for 3 days with a stand. I didn't take in half of the cars because I couldn't work out how to navigate the field and take in every single one.
Yeah.
And they spoke to, I can't remember what you call them, but people that design shops.
Yeah.
And they came back and they were like, yeah, you're totally right. We've done this all wrong. So we'll change it. Because it is really difficult when you put someone in front of 50 cars.
Yeah.
How do you know which one to start with and which order to do it in? Obviously, you get distracted.
Yeah.
You suddenly see in the corner, I've always really liked those, and you go over there and then you forget.
I find the events at Bicester Heritage, I like quite often how when they do sort of smaller events and they have select cars in different places, as a, sort of photographer type person, I love that because each car gets its own scene. But you definitely, at that sort of event, you get to the point, you might come back and someone will be like, well, did you see Lewis Hamilton's F1 car yet? What? Like, yeah, it was like round the back, around there. Like, what? Yeah. So it sort of goes both ways.
Yeah. But then again, that means you go back.
Yeah, and I would way prefer that setup. Like, I love what Luftikult have been doing with their different venues. Their events. Just Amazing. Like crazy different venues.
Amazing. Yeah, I liked that the one in the film studios just looked...
it looked mega.
Incredible.
Yeah. And then the one before that was like some sort of like a wood chopping factory thing.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
And very like properly curated. Yeah.
But going back to it, I think, the future of this industry, I mean, the modern cars, I don't think it's long before people, they may go into a shop on a high street to 3D visualize the car that they're speccing, but you won't go to a dealership anymore to do that. You'll just, there'll be no car there. You'll just put the goggles on and have a look, and they'll say, what color interior did you want? That's how you spec it. And they'll deliver it to your house. I've got a new Ford GT, and I never went anywhere.
Yeah.
We had an interview, my friend Andrew and I that owned cars together, we had an interview, like a conference call on the internet. The guy showed us the different specs and we chose the spec.
Did you get the little spec box?
Got the spec box, but then, then online they did the other, the different things.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, some bloke turns up with a lorry and the concierge guy's there and they hand it over and they give you a proper hand in, which is great. And that was it. And we put it in the garage and
there we go.
It remained delivery mileage for the whole winter. We've done 300 miles in it now, but
it's interesting that, isn't it? Because I think now people are way more comfortable buying stuff over the internet.
Yeah. So this is where we were going. Sorry, I just don't think, and I don't know if you know who Tony Willis is, who used to run Maranello concessionaires back in the day. Super, super nice guy, and been in the trade his whole life. And he said to me the other day, I just do not understand all these companies building these £10 million showrooms, because in 10 years they're going to be redundant. People won't use them unless it's for used cars.
Yeah.
And I think that is the future of this industry, is you've got to get really good at presenting your cars, detailing the history and the condition. And it's a combination of stuff I've seen around the world. Fantasy Junction in San Francisco for years and years and years. On the internet, I wouldn't do this on the internet because it sort of looks a bit messy, but they would put pictures of the underneath of the car.
Okay.
So, they'd have the beauty shots, and then as you scroll down at the bottom, there's a picture of it on the ramp and you're looking underneath the car, and it just simplifies things.
Yeah.
People want to ask you a few questions and then you can answer them quickly and then they make a decision. And that, and with the website, it quite often frustrates me where you've got loads of pictures, loads of information, and someone writes to you and says, I'm interested in more information.
Yeah.
Because it's their standard inquiry line, and you think, well...
Have you read it?
Like the whole history is detailed and there's 50 pictures. I'm not sure what else I can do.
Yeah.
Maybe a video. I don't know. But yes, video.
But then some people always want to talk to someone and they want to be like, tell me about this car, sell me this car.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, all the information's there. Do you want it or not?
Yeah, I guess. And I guess because of the internet and emails, and because I've been doing this the amount of time I have, I've seen the switch from people calling up to pretty much 90% of inquiries come via email.
Yeah.
If someone phones, they're probably 75% actually going to buy that car.
Yeah. They've done all the stuff. Like, for me nowadays, unless it's a new car, which is pretty rare, if I'm buying something, I know pretty much what I'm after, quite specifically. And the more information I have about that, I'm pretty much sold. If I'm calling someone, I'm pretty much there.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, don't mess this up. The car needs to be what you said it is. And if it's what you said it is, I'm going to buy it. But
then on the flip side, emails, I'll reply to 99%. You may miss one. Yeah. You'll reply to 99%, and you'll only hear back from somewhere between 2 and 5% of those guys ever again. Yeah. And it'll get to the point where you recognize the email address and they've never replied to you, and they've inquired on 10 cars in 2 years. And you think, who is this guy? Like, I'm actually quite intrigued now.
Yeah.
But so going back to it, all the way back to Instagram, the photographers, it's about presenting the cars in different light, letting people into the doors of DK and seeing what we do, and making people realize how much we do. I really genuinely believe that we are the only Ferrari specialist in the world that offer the complete service. right up to 7 years old.
Yeah.
So, whether it's storage, potential race preparation, restoration, sales, service, or the management of that whole thing in terms of whatever you want to do with your Ferrari that's between 7 and 70 years old. We can help you. We will look after that for you. You can just trust us to do that. That's really important. And having all the history together and presenting the cars, as I said, and just letting people see as much as they can. It's the future. I think people will visit us. And again, think about this virus. I think people will visit us less and less. I think people visit us a lot because of our location. We're just outside London. Yeah. We're on the tube. We're very close to Heathrow. People visit us a lot, but that's going to decline. And, you need to be ready for that. And videography we've seen of late, we've been doing it for years, I think, on our YouTube channel, which frustrates me. It's got so few followers, DK Engineering TV on YouTube. We've been doing it for years. I think we've got 93 videos we've done over the years. But
are they interesting?
They're varied. I would say there are 10 very good videos on there. There's one about short wheelbase restoration. There's one about 857S. There are some very good videos in there. And I think maybe we were too early. Yeah. Too early to it. And we'll probably do 3 or 4 videos.
Keep doing it every now and then.
Yeah. But I've noticed that some other guys have started doing them a lot more of late, and it's working. So, maybe YouTube's having a resurgence.
Yeah, the right video at the right time does wonders. But equally, you can do the right video and it just for some reason doesn't click with the internet, and you're like, oh well. But then if you're happy with it, you have to just sort of be happy with what you've done, and you're like, well, I enjoyed that, and I think it was good, and people will see it.
Yes, and if you have the ability to create a video that's timeless. So it's not relevant to now. It could be interesting to someone to watch in 5 years' time. Then that's really good material to have.
And if
on your
someone's,
channel.
You don't need that many customers a year relative to the worldwide population. And so if your YouTube videos are only being watched by people that actually, in the end of the day, come through the doors, then you don't need that many people to see your video.
Yeah.
And it could be people searching DK, and it's just part of your, it's part of your online profile and perception. And they're like, oh, they do things properly, or whatever. This is how they do it.
Yeah, all of that stuff, as I said just now, it's about showing people how much we do. Yeah. And I think we'll definitely get busy with videos again soon, especially with what's going on at the moment. I think that's the way we're going to pass time over the next month.
It's a lot of work though, isn't it?
Yeah.
What gets you going in terms of cars? Because obviously you get to see like tons of Ferraris on a daily basis of the full range. What gets you excited?
I guess anything that has a really good story.
Okay.
So the Barchetta that we looked at, that's the Mille Miglia and Le Mans winner from 1949. It's one of the first 20 Ferraris built, full stop. Yeah. And it's the only car to have won both those races in existence. And it's the first Ferrari to have won both of those races. So it is the car that put Ferrari on the map in 1949. Yeah. It's potentially the most significant Ferrari in existence. So when we were lucky enough to be chosen to look after that car last year, and it came here from America, I was so excited, like it was in the workshop, and I'd go down and look at it. And every time someone, came to see us, and I'd show it to them. Yeah. And the guys in the workshop, I'd make sure they understood and appreciated how special that car was. Yeah. That sort of situation still gets me really excited. Cars that I haven't seen before, but I've known about them for a long time. Racing cars, of course. A great racing car is always exciting. But I think cars with a story that I haven't seen before. I've been lucky enough to see a lot of Ferraris over the years, or also cars that I knew well when I was much younger and I haven't seen for a long time. That gets me going as well.
Kind of like old friends coming back.
Exactly, definitely. One of the cars we looked at, that we were talking about the stripe over the roof, that short wheelbase. I remember that car as a kid. When the guy that owned it was super cool. He was only 24 years old when he bought that car. Yeah. And he asked Dad to help him find a car, and he did, and he restored it for him, and then it lived with us for a long time. And then it went away for 15 years. And I used to see it at concours events in America, but it wasn't quite the same. And then when our client bought it and it came back again, it was sort of like an old friend coming home. It was, and the Walt Disney Tour de France, which we didn't actually talk about, but that car we owned in the 90s, and then seven or so years ago I bought it back for a client, and we've restored it, and it lives with us. And again, I get excited about that, having been around these cars all my life. As I said earlier, one of my earliest childhood memories is being in a Comp Daytona, going up the M25.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, and then finally an F40. When the workshop phone me and say, my days are so frantic, and they say, we've got an F40, we want you to road test it. And the first reaction is always like, I don't really have time for this. But then, you pull out of here, turn right, go to join the main road, turn left. It's a 60 limit.
Put your foot down.
Put your foot down, and you just think, oh, these are so good. Still so good. And then when you have to slow down, you think, oh, blimey.
Yes, yeah, that's it. They're so unbelievably
bad at braking.
Boosty and powerful, and then so bad at stopping.
But there is a solution. There is a solution now, and that is a ceramic disc and pad change that fits in the standard wheel, in the standard caliper. We're going to be doing some tests with those later on this year.
Interesting.
So I think that's the solution, and it'll look, and because of the design of the wheel,
it'll look the same.
It'll look the same. You won't know. And these particular ceramic discs, they have a bright shine to them. So it'll be interesting to see what how they work. But yeah, that gets me going. When you get back, and I love the way that an F40 is the only car that is the car. When you get back and you sort of put it away and you take the key out and shut the door, you always think to yourself, I'm really lucky that I made it home.
Yeah.
Always.
And such a fizz driving it.
Yeah.
So still nuts, which I think is the bit, for me, when I've gone and driven mine, and I don't drive it very often, it's I get out of it and I'm still just sort of sit there and go, but that was made like 40 years ago. Or whatever it is, 30 years ago.
It was penned 40 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. They produced 30 years ago. It still feels unbelievably quick.
And how many cars can you do that in 5 to 10 kilometres? I get that feeling. And that's the thing when I'm selling them, because obviously we've sold, I like to think we've sold more than anyone else in the world. I'm pretty sure we have. I know that someone else thinks they've sold more, which I find confusing. But
maybe you've sold both. You've all sold the same cars.
Maybe. I people say to me, well, it's too low mileage, I want to drive it. And I always say, I guarantee maybe in the first year, and you can tell me how you've got on with this. I'll say, I guarantee maybe in the first year you'll do 1,000 kilometres. I guarantee you won't do more.
Yeah.
And I guarantee that every year after that, you'll do somewhere between a maximum of 100 and 200 kilometres a year. And that's it.
Yeah.
And they always look at me and they say, you're mad. Like, of course not. And then they end up buying a car and it might be 5, 10, 15,000 kilometres. And then we end up, servicing it 2, 3, 4 years later. And you look at the mileage and you just drop them an email and say, I see that you've managed to do 600 kilometres in your 3 years of ownership. How's that been? And they have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those cars that you don't need to go 190 miles an hour in.
No.
You don't need to do 50 miles in to really enjoy it. You will literally... I always call it my Sunday morning after breakfast blast. It's your
100%.
Sunday morning after breakfast blast, 20 kilometres, and you'll get back and you'll say, that's enough.
Yeah.
My heart's beating a lot.
Yeah.
And
I feel like I've been on the edge enough.
Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? I mean, how many kilometres have you done in how many years?
I haven't done very many.
Yeah. But you've enjoyed it.
Slightly self-limiting, but at the same time, it is, and I've said to everyone that asks me about it, I'm like, it is unbelievable. I have not driven a car, like personally, I haven't driven a car that's that intense over the right road, the right time. But the rest of the time, I like put me on a motorway, not interested. Driving around town, not interested. And where I keep it, I can turn out of where it is, and within 3 minutes, I'm on a good B road or whatever, and I will drive it for half a day, 40 minutes, half an hour, and I'll come back and I will literally be buzzing off that for the next 3 months.
And come on, how many kilometres?
Not a lot.
Like 100, 300?
No, I don't know. I think I've done...
Maybe 1,000.
I think I've probably done 800 miles.
In...
Not a long time.
3, 4 years? Is it?
4 years, something like that.
There we go. And most of them were in the first year?
I did a lot in the first year.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty much. I'd say I probably drive a couple of hundred miles
a year.
And that's great.
And actually, I follow you. So I see when you've used it and when you've done... And I wouldn't say that you're someone that's, not used the cars. And I can't... I mean, it's not a topic. It might be a topic, but that's the one thing about Instagram that really is starting to wind me up is every time you put a low mileage car on, all these guys that say, like, complain about the fact that it's low mileage. You think, well, you don't know the circumstances of why it's low mileage. And actually, you know, a lot of it does come down to money. A lot of people have put a lot of money into these cars and they are a little bit afraid to use them because there is a big difference between high and low mileage.
I love the idea of just driving at like 10,000 miles a year. I say the idea. I actually don't necessarily think in its current state with a loud exhaust, I couldn't drive it that long because you'd need new ears.
I also think something else that people really have overlooked lately is how many cars people have today. You know, when one of the first F40s I sold, nearly 20 years, 18, 17 years ago, it was to a guy that had a 355 Spider, and he part exchanged his 355 Spider, and I think he gave us something like £45,000 on top of the 355 Spider.
Nice.
And it was like, that was the deal.
Yeah.
And that was his car.
Yeah.
And that was his car. And he probably did 3,000 kilometers in 5 years when he owned that car. And that was his car. But everyone you sell all these sorts of cars to that you talk about the mileage a lot have 5 or 6 cars. Yeah. And so you can't possibly use all of them.
And most people are time poor. These people are cash rich, time poor. Yeah. And you've got only a certain number of weekends a year, certain number of events, whatever. And I used to be this person, be like, this person doesn't drive this car at all. And then you realise, like, I know people that have like 30 cars. And like, if you've got 30 cars, even if you've got 5 cars, even if you've got 3 cars, like your annual mileage is the same, and it just gets divided up, and then you allocate it however you want to allocate it. And I think that's possibly something that why now I look at my GT3 RS, for example, which I love, but in my head I'm like, I don't drive it that much. And then in reality, I still drive the same number of miles a year, but it's because I use different cars, and it just gets proportionally used a bit less.
Exactly, and that's my point. You know, is that lots of people have lots of cars. Most people that own these sorts of cars that we talk about, the mileage, have a lot of cars.
If you're buying one of these cars at the price that they are now, you have a few cars.
And it's tough. You know, there's no one out there, I think, that we've sold an F42 in recent years that has no other cars.
Yeah, it's very unlikely.
I think maybe one actually, but then he sold it quite soon afterwards to buy a Carrera GT.
Yeah.
You know, so he was ticking boxes, and that probably was his £1 million budget for a supercar.
Yeah.
But it's a very different time again. You know, it's not 150,000 like it was back then. They are £1 million plus. Well, or minus, depending on what you buy. On average.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So normally, I think we've sort of been getting a fair few minutes. When I sort of wrap up, I have 5 questions that I ask everyone. Are you ready?
Yeah, and so I haven't prepared for this. So embarrassing. I haven't listened to any of your podcasts.
Oh, yeah, but they're well long. There may be some interesting ones out there. You have a little flick through. Right, first question. Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
Yeah, I think same journey 2 or 3 different times, and that was in the good old days going to Le Mans.
Back when it was fun.
Yeah, and my brothers are 9 and 11 years older than me. So my brother is 9 years older than me at that time. At the time when we were doing it, and I wasn't racing as I do now. So I won't really go to Le Mans now because I can't stand going and not racing. You know, I'd love to do that race one day, and I will go back, but I've not been for a number of years for that reason, because you just sort of get miserable. You know, it was a really good.
Have you ever raced there?
I did a support race there in a Huracan GT3.
Okay.
4 years ago, I think. And I have also done a historic support race there probably 3 times, once in the GT40 and twice with my father in his 500 Testarossa. GT40 was awesome. We had such a good weekend, and that was a boys' trip. That's probably the last time I went, actually, because we all went down, and because it was before the race on the morning and we came second, we just, had such a good weekend. Yeah.
What's a GT40 like driving around Le Mans?
Amazing. So Andrew Smith, who I own the car with, and we've had it since 2012, he summed it up perfectly the first time we went there for the Le Mans Classic with it. Actually, no, sorry, it was for that race, I think, for the Le Mans Sport race. And he said, the car's great. It's a racing car. It's different at different circuits. But when you get onto the Mulsanne straight for the first time in a GT40, you suddenly, something taps into you and says, this is what this car was made to do, and now I get it. Yeah. And that's it. It's at Le Mans, it's just, I think we were doing, at the Le Mans Classic 2 years ago, I was doing 295 kilometers an hour in the dark, having a flat out race with a guy called David Hart, who's a mad Dutchman, who is great friend, great guy, but he is utterly mad and has done the 24 hours. So in the dark, he was really good. And at the end of it, it was just, I just couldn't believe what I'd just been doing and living a sort of childhood dream.
That's so cool.
And then the 5 a.m. race is always good when you go down the Mulsanne for the first time when the sun's just coming up and you go through that mist time. And it's just so special. But going back to memorable driving trips, so we used to go for boys' trips, and one of them was, I think it must have been 2003 or 2004, and a Challenge Stradale and a 996 GT3 RS were both new cars. And luckily we had one of each. So we did that trip, and it was
sick.
It was around about the same time. And I can't remember if it was just before or just after, but Top Gear did the same comparison.
Yeah.
I'd like to think it was before, but you'd be able to look up Le Mans 2003 or 4. But anyway, it was the same comparison, and so we drove down in one each, and then we swapped for the way back. So that was very memorable because it was the first time I'd sort of really, I was sort of grown up and been given the responsibility of these amazing cars that were new. And that's when cars were getting exciting then. That's really the start of for me, I think that's the start of the lightweight revolution, is the early noughties with like M3 CSL, GT3 RSs, Challenge Stradale. Yeah. It was a really good time, wasn't it? When you look back at the cars that came out then.
Yeah, it was very cool.
And all affordable. You look at the cost of a pista today in comparison to how much Challenge Stradale was new. Yeah, they made a lot more sense, didn't they? They weren't much more than the standard car.
All of those cars. Yeah, like I look at my 997 RS, I was looking at the invoice for it. I think it was like 105, something like that.
So good, isn't it?
I wish these cars were as available. Like no one ordered them back then.
I know.
I think my car.
Do you remember how difficult it was for them to sell CSLs?
Yeah.
Like I think you could, if you waited long enough, you could get one for 20,000 under list as a brand new car, and then they were 30 grand forever. Yeah, absolutely forever. And now, I mean, obviously I think they're not as valuable as left-hand drive CSLs in the UK, which is, I don't really quite understand. Yeah, so a left-hand drive CSL I think is over 100 grand. Well, they certainly were a couple of years ago.
Well, I guess it must be in the European market.
They just get it.
They get it.
Yeah.
And maybe there aren't that many. Yeah. Whereas here we've got a bit more than we need.
Yeah. I mean, but another great car. So that was a memorable driving trip. And then a few years later, we did the same trip, but an F40 and an F50. Oh. And the deal was, and I remember the F50, I look very young. So I must have been 23 at the time because the number plate.
You'd still look young driving an F40 and F50.
Well, exactly. And the number plate I remember on the F50 was N231CAN. And we were on the ferry on the way there. And that year we got the ferry from Newhaven to Dieppe, I think, so you basically get to nearly Brighton. But it's actually once you come off the M25, it's a really good run. And I remember people saying to me, what on earth are you doing in that F50? How can you be in that? How old are you? And I said, I'm 23, and that is ridiculous. And then one of them was like, did you pay for that number plate then? Because it was N23 can. But anyway, so but I mean, they weren't huge money at the time. They were a lot of money, but they weren't nearly £2 million that they are now. It was, if I hazard a guess, I think that car was probably late twos, like 290,000 or 300,000. And back then we could afford to stock an Enzo, an F40, a 288, and an F50. Couldn't do that today.
Those cars cost less than a lot of houses back then.
Yeah, and you could have those cars, and it was, it was always safe margin. It was, you'd buy the car for this much, and you'd have a relatively small margin, but it was almost guaranteed because they were just steadily appreciating. And so my brother was in this F40, I was in the F50, and the deal was we would drive down in one car, and then for the journey home afterwards, we'd swap. But we had the biggest fight because I was in love with the F50, and I'd never really appreciated an F50 until then, but it was so good. And so eventually he agreed, he'd take the F40 back and I'd come back in the F50. And I was with a very good mate of mine, Squeezer is his nickname. And we came off that ferry at, I think it must have been about 10 p.m. on the Sunday night. So it was one of those beautiful summer's evenings where it was it was dark, but it was only just dark, and it was very clear light sky.
Such an amazing time
and
to
we
drive
had,
that.
and we had the roof. It's F50, so we had it in sort of targa mode.
Does the roof fit in the?
Well, no,
front?
you have two setups. So it's a workshop job. So you can either have it as a coupe, or you can have it as a roadster, and it has a soft roof that goes behind the seats. Yeah. So we had it in that. And we had the roof off the whole weekend, I think, and it was and it had the exhaust valves wide open. So it wasn't a sports exhaust, but with the valves wide open, they are noisy. And it was just one of the best sort of like open top, flat out blasts to the M25. And we didn't get caught because at that time, I mean, we didn't break the speed limit, I'd like to say.
Yeah.
But we were
just drove enthusiastic.
But we drove up to the speed limit very fast. And it was just a great drive. And you can't drive like that on the roads anymore, which is why we were talking about racing cars earlier. I think racing cars are such an interesting proposition because it's the future.
And you can drive them flat out. You can drive a race car as hard as you want on a track. No one's going to tell you anything else other than, you should maybe go a bit faster.
Yeah.
Do it on the street, you're bellend.
Yeah, I mean, I do not drive fast on the road. I obviously, we all did when we were younger, we did. But today, look, unless it's, there's a reason or an opportunity or a test or whatever, but, within reason and being sensible. But I really don't drive fast on the road anymore.
Do you think that's because you get a lot of track time related?
I would say it's because yes, that's a huge part of it. And B, because I've got so much on my mind.
Yeah.
The business has grown so much and we've got over 40 employees now and there is so much going on. And it's, it's a fast industry in terms of you've got to be the first guy to get the cars and you've got to get the deals done. And if there's one man looking for a particular model and there's two or three for sale, you want him to buy yours, you've always got to be on it. So I think actually a lot of it's that. But, and finally, it's very irresponsible.
Yeah.
I think in today's, the UK is more crowded than ever on the roads. You've just got to be so careful, and I think rightly so. I think we all sort of perhaps drove in a way that we shouldn't have before, and that was then, and this is now, and it really is socially irresponsible.
And modern cars, even old cars, are just so fast, so easy.
Again, we come back to the F40, and it's you're not necessarily breaking the speed limit. It's the way you get there.
Yeah,
it's the way you accelerate up to 60 or 70 miles an hour.
One of the best / worst things about it, like a normal suspension one, not adjustable suspension, is the suspension is a bit crap. And because of that, you get all of this interesting stuff at normal speeds. And therefore, you get that layer of involvement. When a car's just unbelievably locked down the entire time, you have to go faster. Yeah. Like a 720S or something.
Yeah. Or a LaFerrari.
A LaFerrari feels like a 458. When you first drive on, supercar, amazingly smooth and sensitive. But if you're able to go over 100 miles an hour in one, it's incredible. The difference is incredible. But you can't on the road. Take it to the track, go for a hoon. Right, next question. 5-car garage, unlimited value, and just because you sell Ferraris doesn't mean you'd have to have Ferraris. Okay, so 5-car garage, that's unlimited value, and it has to fit into your life. Whew. So if you had kids, I don't know whether you have kids. No, lots of pressure too. I think the first car has to be an F40. Okay. Non-cat, non-adjust, lots of weave, straight through exhaust. Red? Maybe not, actually. Maybe not. That's an interesting one. That is something. We are restoring an F40 at the moment, and I'm thinking about maybe doing something a bit different. Not radically, not trying to do a Singer or anything like that, but just make some improvements, little improvements. But so for sure, an F40. I think weirdly a 599 GTO. Okay. I think we had one before that I shared with Andrew Smith again, who we own the GT4, Ford GT and the GT40 with, that we sold to pay for the Ford GT. And we had so much fun with that car. It was incredible. And it was just such a capable all-round car. I'd love to have one of those again. And it was because it had a big boot and you could put lots of, luggage and stuff in and do cross-country. Very usable. Cross-European jaunts. And again, really fast. And it was that nice balance between being quite raw
and slightly primitive, but
Yeah.
not too sophisticated. So that single clutch, if you're driving it hard, is great. Like
Yeah.
it's got that kick to it.
Yeah.
It's not
Got a
seamless.
bit of wham.
Yeah, so I think I'd have a 599 GTO, and then I'd probably go quite old and racy. So I'd love to have. So in the
What's your daily in this scenario?
well, I live at the house at the office. So
Okay, so you literally just walk down.
so do I need a?
You don't need to get
Do I
to
have to
work.
do that?
I don't know. You can literally. No, this is your 5 car
Would I
garage.
have a daily? I mean, I don't keep a car in the garage. So
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah, the garage is-
realistically, you don't have to drive to work.
yeah, I don't. So I don't really need a daily car. I
Okay.
wasn't even thinking about that. Sorry.
No. I'm just wondering if
I mean, well, a day. If you want me to choose a daily,
you don't have to.
I'm not going to actually because I don't
No.
have one. So
Okay.
I go old school. So Dad had a lightweight E-Type in
Yeah.
the 60s. One of the, I think there were 12, but it was a low drag 49 FXN, quite a famous car. I'd have that. I've always wanted that car.
Yeah.
I've actually always wanted a Jaguar D-Type,
Mm.
and I'd have a long nose D-Type. I think would be a seriously cool car to have.
They are very cool.
And again, that's because I just remember as a kid, when we had D-Types in and out the workshop, we used to look after one for Anthony Bamford, and we restored Ralph Lauren's car for him as well. And they always struck me as just an amazingly advanced car for the time, and everything about it was just
Yeah.
right. So that's 4 cars, isn't
That's
it?
4. Got one more.
So one more car. I think it's cliche, and I apologise, but I would have an F1.
I was literally about to say. Are you
I would
about to
have
say
an F1, and I'd
GTR?
have- No. GTR has 2 seats. GTR has no windows, no air
LM?
conditioning. Ooh. Well, I was going to say an F1 with a high downforce kit, but
Okay.
an LM, yeah, maybe an LM. An LM or an F1 with a high downforce kit. I think the car I would like doesn't exist,
Okay.
but it would be in a great British colour of some description. So
Yeah.
some sort of green. Some sort of green, I think, with a high downforce kit, because I am a kid of the 90s,
Yeah.
born in the 80s, loved cars in the 90s. And, the high downforce kit with the louvers on the front wings.
I thought that red car at, is it a Pebble or something? Like last year? It was like a red LM or something? That was quite cool.
So there was a car with an LM engine,
Maybe.
which was
it
grey.
just-
And then there was another one like 4 years before that was like a burnt orange.
Yeah.
That was quite a nice car, which was high downforce kit, LM engine. I think I would have one of those. And, it's cliche, and people always say, oh, they're as good to drive as you think they are. Actually, they're not, which I quite like about them. The steering doesn't self-centre. It's quite heavy steering.
Yeah.
If you're in a hot country and there's 3 of you in the car, the air
getting
conditioning
hot.
cannot cope. And even with the upgrade, they did an upgrading period. It cannot cope. And I like that rawness about them. I like the fact that they're on this pedestal. And I think that probably 50% of the owners, the first time they drive them, think this is going to be
Something life-changing.
this is going to be easy, and it's going to be like driving an M3
Yeah.
BMW, and it's not. It's so different. So I like that sort of peculiarity about them, and the fact that a lightly modified road car won Le Mans. That's a really good piece of history.
I feel like it's just the car for our sort of generation.
It is, yeah. And look, there's nothing wrong with the CLK GTR. There's nothing wrong with the 996 GT1, but the F1 just has that.
It's the one.
It has that edge. It's the one that started it.
Yeah.
The original and pure. That's
Drove to Le Mans and won.
yeah. And like I said, it's cliche. And I think a few years ago I would have said 250 GTO because I was always trying. Again, I would have said that was cliche, and that was because I was trying to avoid the obvious cars, but you always come back to it. And I think I've got to that with the F1. There is something very special about them, and we're lucky that we store one here and are able to look at it as often as we
Every
please.
now and then.
Yeah,
they're cool.
but I think 5's a tough number.
It is.
5 is a really tough number.
Wait for the next one.
Okay.
You can only drive one car for the rest of your life, and you're allowed like a £500 beater for other usages, but one car.
Oh dear. I mean, can I invent it?
Oh, that's a different answer. I have not heard that, but you can. In what way?
The refreshing thing is that so many new cars are actually really good.
Yep.
And I think that a GTC 4 Lusso is a great car.
It is.
And people would be surprised by that. But why? In this day and age, they're comfortable.
Yeah.
If you leave it outside for a winter, it will not be steamed up when you get in it in the morning, unless you've got a bad one. But, generally they shouldn't be. They have great nav. They have great sound system. They have heated seats at work.
Yeah.
They have really good Bluetooth.
Boot.
They have a boot. You can sit 4 adults in them comfortably. If you buy the V8, it's actually quite fuel efficient.
Okay.
Amazingly.
Yeah.
But then everyone says, oh, you haven't got the V12, but hey ho. They're really good. I think that's a really hard car to beat.
They are.
As a forever car.
Very good.
And actually today, I saw the other day that there's one advertised with 9,000 miles with a dealer for 160.
Yeah. I was looking at them the other day.
That's quite difficult to beat.
There's like a maroony coloured one for sale somewhere.
There's a Verdi Zeltweg one at Meridian Modena.
What colour's that?
That's like dark metallic green with tan interior. It's really nice. Yeah.
Tasty. This maroon one, I'll show it to you. It has like a chocolatey interior as well. It's not a colour I would go for, but when I saw this,
yeah,
right car, right time. Okay, GCC 4 Lisso.
Yeah, I mean, if I could invent one, then it would be something along those lines. It'd be something that
Not
had
a Koenigsegg Jumeirah.
Well, I mean, what a car!
What a car!
What a car! And we were looking at the CCR that we've got here earlier, and I think they are. I think Koenigsegg's on an amazing trajectory. I think they're Mr. Pagani, forgive me, but I think they are going in the direction Pagani should be going in, which is revolutionary technology and thinking outside the box.
Actually doing some engineering.
Yeah, and that's what you want. And that's why I like the Speedtail, because it's a prospect of 3 guys jumping in the car together for a long weekend to go to a race meeting or something with their luggage. I think it's a cool idea. Like I would like to see more stuff like that.
I would like to see more different stuff. I 100% agree.
With a boot.
Yes, with a boot.
Because, you go to, I will sometimes go to the Silverstone Classic or Goodwood and try and take something decent. And actually, the only car that you can take your helmet in and your race kit and your clothes is an F40.
Yeah.
Amazingly, because they actually have
You've got tons of space.
A boot. Anything else, it's the passenger seat.
Take
so
like a laugh, nothing.
Well, you passenger seat, but then you go on your own.
Yeah.
Which, no one wants to sort of turn up.
Yeah, you want to take someone else.
Take someone with you, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right, next question. What's the most undervalued car at the moment? What do you think is like cheap and good value?
Well, there's about 35 of them on my website. No, undervalued. Oh gosh, that is really tough. I should have planned for this, shouldn't I?
What are you secretly buying up and putting in storage?
I think you've seen them. Oh, look, I could say that. I do think F40s are great value for money still, even though they are 10 times what they were, 20 years ago. They are surprisingly, only, in my mind, only 5 or 6 times what they were 5 years ago. 10 years ago. And yeah, I still think they tick a lot of boxes, and just anyone listening to this will have listened to us talking about F40s. Yeah. We both know F40s really well, and we've spent so much time talking about them. And people always say, well, there's 1,300 of them. But there aren't 1,300 of them.
Yeah.
You got to take
there's literally, one burnt down 2 weeks ago?
Well, there we go. I mean, look, there's probably 1,200 cars running around. You can, I expect that most of your listeners are probably European-based. You can discount the US spec cars because as a European, you wouldn't want one of those. Yeah. And then when you look at the balance of cars, and let's say there's 900 left to choose from, once you pick out what you want, whether it's mileage-wise, CAT, non-CAT, adjust, suddenly you're looking at 250 cars for your spec that you want and your price bracket. And then you look at the history, and it's very easy to whittle it down. And, I think that's probably why they've been such a steady appreciator as opposed to, the F50s doubled in value in 1 year. F40s have never done that. They've just gone sort of 350, 500, 700, 800, million, 1.2. Lowest mileage cars now are 1.6. Highest mileage cars are, I don't think you can buy a car realistically for less than 750 now, unless it's got a huge story,
Yeah.
And at 750, it's going to be 60,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
But, those cars are all about compromise. There is a compromise you're going to have to make, whether it's lack of history, lack of, high mileage or whatever.
I find when we see loads of really new cars, that might be a special edition of let's say something like a 599 GTO or F12 TDF or a Speciale or GT3 RS 4 litre or whatever. These cars that are sort of the middle-ish of the range of that thing, they're not the hypercar, they're not the top level. And these cars sometimes get up to, you know, there was a point in time when a 4 litre GT3 RS was 600 grand or 500, and a Carrera GT was 500 at the same time. Oh, you know, they were within not a lot of each other.
And you think that doesn't make sense.
And you're like, well, that's just balmy.
Yeah.
Because one of those is a different category of car. It exists in the category above. And you find these cars, whether it's, you know, 599 GTO, they got up to 900 for right-hand drives at one point in time. And and then, you know, these other cars like an Enzo or whatever was a similar amount of money at the same time. And it's just, you go, hang on, they're not the same.
Well, and then maybe I've just, you know, and my best mate, Ed, he always says, whenever you say, what's your budget, you always double it for me. Yeah, when I answer his question, I always double it. And I've probably gone in, you know, with too high a value car there, but actually in the market, you know, 288s, F50s, Enzos, they're all, they're circa 2 million.
Yeah.
And an F40 is circa 1 million for a car that I think more people would want. If you had 100 people in a room and said, right, everyone put their hand up for an F40, 288, you know, car for life, one car, F40, 288, F50, Enzo, the F40 is going to win every single day of the week.
Definitely the slightly younger people.
Bigger supply, but much bigger demand.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think I always think they will be, but actually you've touched on something just now and it's sort of a side conversation. But there's some really good value deals out there at the moment for modern cars, and GC4 Listo we've discussed already, but
the 130 grand 720S.
Yeah. And actually, I get confused with the names, but is it a 600 LT?
Yeah.
You can buy one of those for that's new for sort of 160.
Yeah.
A new 600 LT for 160. That's a lot of car for money.
There's just a long list of cars that are, I'm watching, and annoyingly the ones that I really want aren't coming down. But things like an F12, I'd love to own an F12 at some point to have done the sort of V12, not sort of done the V12 thing. I'm sure I'd like to have more V12s at some point in time as well. But they're just slowly coming down. I think you can get an F12 for 150 now. You can probably get one for less, I'm sure. In a year's time, will they be 130? I don't know. In 6 months' time, will they be 130? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think, you know, there's a lot of people out there, and I'm going back to my experience of 08, 09.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people out there that have put their hard-earned money into these sorts of cars, whether it be 550, 575, 599, F12. And those guys will just not be prepared to take those sorts of hits.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, when cars get to a certain age, they will have dropped enough that they can't go any lower.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
And naturally, an F12 is a better car than a 599.
Yeah.
So it's going to have to be more than a 599. And a 599 kind of has to be more than a 575.
Yeah.
And a 575 kind of has to be more than a 550. Obviously, Joker in the pack is 575 with a manual gearboxes.
Yeah.
Above a 599. But you get what I mean.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of that stuff, I think a really good trick at the moment as well is to buy anything that's over 5 years old.
Yeah.
Anything under 5 years old. There's a lot of people that can afford to dump money. And that's why you can buy an 812 today for... Yeah. You could buy an 812 with 1,000 miles for £260,000. Sorry to all the guys that have got cars out there.
If you've just bought an 812 and you turn around to your dealer, they are basically giving you 100 grand less than you paid for.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as a retail buyer right now, you could go and buy a £350,000 list within the last 12 months, 812 for 260.
Yeah.
If you just
100%
phone all the guys and just say, look, 260 on the table, let's go. That's a lot of car for money. And obviously, you know, there are lots of people out there that have been buying everything and have done very well with their LaFerrari and things like that. They've flipped and they've made
loads,
500, maybe 200 on their F12 TDF. So they're okay with that, you know, if they look at the portfolio. But when those guys buy those cars at that level, they're going to accept that they're going to probably be late ones or early twos in the next 2 years' time. But then they can't drop below that because an 812 is a better car than an F12.
Yeah.
And that will always remain, and it always has done.
That point about you saying where owners start to stop selling cars. And there's always going to be people that need to get out of cars, and then, you know, people die or whatever. There's these sort of situations. But I definitely have with the cars, let's say, that I own, there is a low point where there's absolutely no way I'm selling it.
Yeah, and I was talking about 2009.
Yeah.
That was it. You know, there were people on the phone in Monitor saying, I will pay this for the car. I think it will be there soon.
Yeah.
And in the other ear, the guy's like, well, I just won't sell it for that. So send it back.
Exactly.
And you know, there's no denying the last 2 or 3 years we've seen some changes in the market, but we found that bottom.
Yeah.
And, you know, that it's just happened.
And
the modern car thing is all to do with, you know, it's a completely different topic for a different podcast, I'm sure. But, you know, the premium market for normal model new cars, McLaren, Ferrari, it's over. It's gone. And people shouldn't be buying cars for that reason. That's not why you buy these cars, to make profit. It's to enjoy them, and it's business as usual. Everyone needs
to accept that your car, like, halves in value every 3 years. Or
people need to remember, not accept, but remember.
Yeah.
You know, this has been a short-lived thing that guys have just put their name down for all these different cars.
Yeah.
And you know, when you
flipped them in 3 months,
and when you haven't got a great relationship with a brand like Ferrari, and suddenly you're getting a pista, something's changed, hasn't it? So.
I don't think, let's say, the Speciale, that wasn't very difficult to get hold of.
I think the Speciale was probably the first car. It was towards the end of its run.
Yeah, at the end.
At the end, they were like, actually, you can have one. But not many people realised that. And it obviously was a great market.
And by that point in time, by the time you were getting to the end, everyone was very aware that they were plus 100. So you're like, well, if I can get one of literally, I can sell it before I take delivery.
Yeah.
But it was that period of time
when
those cars started to become interesting.
Yeah. But it was always going to be short-lived, because all the manufacturers were going to say, well, let's just build more, launch more models. And we are where we are. But it's good for me because, you know, we don't supply new cars.
No.
And I've never really been a flipper or a premium dealer of that, you know, buying cars for premium and selling them for premium plus X. You know, we've been specialising in cars that we understand and we know. And I cannot tell you the last 6 months how many people have come full circle back. They disappeared off for 5 years to go and buy all these new
latest,
modern cars.
And
they've probably got a Monza coming, which they're excited about and maybe a bit scared. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a cool car to own, but I'm glad the price point isn't as high as everyone thought it was going to be.
Do we know if they've sold them all?
Yeah, they must have. They must have.
How many cars are they making? 1,000?
I don't know. It's not my thing, but
you're like 7 years down the line.
Exactly. I'll tell you in 7 years. But I'm seeing these guys, or we're seeing here, these guys come back and start looking at 275s and, you know, other cars again, which is quite refreshing to sort of discover they've come full circle again. But, you know, there's a lot of new cars on the market, and I think there's some great cars. There's
so many special editions now. It used to be that was a rare thing and they were quite unique. Whereas all the manufacturers at the moment are just coming out with special edition after special edition after special edition. And I'm not saying they're not great cars, and they probably are great cars, but there are just too many of them, I think. And I think possibly what's happened is the manufacturers have gone, well, no one really wants to buy the normal cars, because there's this perception that the special cars are going to hold value or be worth more. So no one in their right mind would buy, let's just say, you can buy a 720S new, or you could buy a 765 LT, or you could buy a normal 911 Carrera, or you could buy a GT3 RS. In my eyes, it's always worth it. It's in the last couple of years, it's always been worth taking out finance or whatever to cover the gap to get you into a GT3 rather than a normal 911, because you're going to come out of your 3 years of ownership and it's going to cost you nothing. Whereas they're now producing so many of these cars, they've almost become the standard model. That's just what everyone buys, a 600 LT. They've made a ton of 600 LTs. So everyone's bought them, and then now they become the normal car, and therefore they're no longer special, and they lose value again.
It's just another model.
It's just a car, and it's another model. Yeah. It's another car that someone's built with no roof and no windscreen.
Yeah. And I think at the moment we've got this tremendous opportunity ahead of us where, because of this electric takeover, which I don't understand when you actually look at it and you look at the resources required and the draw that's going to be required. They're going to have to make a U-turn.
It's like taking your finance out on your CO2 when you buy an electric car.
Yeah.
Does it pay back in 10 years? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, it's, they're going to have to make a U-turn on that. But that said, the technology, obviously there's immense pressure to change the technology.
It'll get there.
I think the classic car world has just, as of about now, been solidified into this 120-year period. And, there are different segments. So you've got your brass cars and your veteran cars and your classic cars from the 60s and 70s, and then your modern classics, and then your supercars and your hypercars. And there'll be different segments, a bit like the art market, where you've got impressionists and pop art, all that stuff. There'll be these different segments with a finite number of cars, and people will be into everything or into certain segments, and there'll be people that only buy that stuff and people that only specialize in that stuff, and it'll be its own controlled environment. And I don't think boys are ever going to be, and girls, but in the main, boys are ever going to not like fast cars, loud noises. It's ingrained in our DNA. When you look at children and what they like, as you grow up,
and hopefully we're going to be around for another 60 years or something. Maybe not quite, but it's that sort of amount. That's a long time for us to be owning and buying cars.
Yeah, we're not going to forget it overnight.
No. Maybe the kids born now might not have it.
Yeah.
But that's still a long time.
You still see it, you still, when you obviously test drive these cars on the road a lot, and you still see the appreciation though from youngsters. They get the phones out and they take the photos. So it's not going away.
No.
And we have our own events to go to, and you have the Goodwoods of the world, which the industry's grown so much from that side of things, and it's still growing.
That Sunday morning drive.
Yeah.
That 30 minutes in your F40.
Yeah.
That's never getting old.
No, and it's and it's healthy. It's like, it's sort of get up with a clear head and go for it. It's I think it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Right, final question. What's the most interesting car to you at the moment? What are you sort of like Googling, looking up, going, that's interesting. YouTube, whatever.
Actually, it's not necessarily interesting car, and we touched on this subject earlier. It's cars with rare specifications.
Okay.
So a color specifically.
Yeah.
So, to use the Carrera GTs again, the blue cars we did really well with. We had lots of interest. Could sell both of those cars 5 times over again. So, I am really interested in paying a premium for cars that separate themselves from the crowd.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what people want now. So, and low mileage comes into that as well. It's if the car's different because it was a unique spec, and I don't mean tailor-made. I mean, just we were talking about those GC4 Lussos.
Yeah. And
you were talking about a dark red one. I was talking about a dark green one.
Yeah.
Those sorts of cars.
Not silver, not black.
No, not the standard
white,
colours.
Whatever.
Although, again, before Christmas, we sold the silver F50, one of 4 cars built, and it was mega.
Oh yeah. I do like a Grigio Silver Saloon. I think
but that was rare for an F50. Yeah. Or going back to our benchmark model, like an F40 with low mileage, I think is really interesting, because there are lots of people out there that want to sort of almost be the first owner, didn't have an opportunity to own it originally, so that makes sense to them. You get that with F12 TDFs at the moment. There are quite a few low mileage cars out there, and there are loads of guys that want one that actually, when they were ordered 4 or 5 years ago, they were definitely not in the position to even think about ordering one, but have done very well of late and would like to have a new car, to be the first owner of that car.
Yeah.
So, and we've actually just today sold an F12 TDF with 100 miles on the clock, which was Grigio Titanium Opaco from the factory. Looks stunning.
It looks so cool.
That sort of car is, that over a red F12 TDF. We sold it in a day amongst all of the stuff that's going on at the moment. Stole it in a day, whereas a red one we wouldn't have done as well with. So that's the stuff I'm looking for. If I can find or buy cars that stand out from the crowd because of celebrity ownership, because of low mileage, because of individual colour, or something rare and unique, like the Bentley.
Yeah.
The Carlo Telamo Bentley is. I'm happy to own that car.
It's crazy
for a year because it looks great. It's a great talking point.
It's cool.
everyone loves it.
And when everyone, it's wandering around, everyone goes like, "Oh, tell me about this because this is totally different."
Yeah, and it's cool. Like I don't like Bentleys that much, but I really like that car, and I was impressed with the way it drove. And when you read the story and look at how the lengths they went to satisfy him, which is I guess why it cost £1 billion when it was new. It's all there, and it's very identifiable, right from the bonnet to the yellow badges to the turned aluminium,
the yellow
fascias,
fans, whatever,
all that stuff. It's all the little details that added up to this fabulous one-off car. Yeah, that's what I want. I want to have the if someone wants to buy that car or a car that's unique, that's what I'm looking at now. Not run of the mill, just another
458 or whatever.
Speciale, I was going to say, yeah. Although I like Speciale.
I saw a Speciale Aperta today in London, a yellow one.
Cool cars.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, again, one of those cars that got to some sort of nonsense value at some point, which...
Yeah, some people made a lot of money.
Yeah.
But just bonkers.
But where did that come from?
Yeah.
Did I miss that car won Le Mans?
No. And it had a badge. It had a badge. One of the most embarrassing things I think I've ever seen in a car. It has a badge in between the seats that says like, "We won," and then it's a magazine award for an engine. What?
Brilliant.
Really cool, mate.
Well done. Yeah. But I think the nice thing about Speciale Aperta, though, is that there is a theme to a collection that you can have there.
Yeah.
Going back to earlier, we said that no one has one car anymore.
Yeah.
If you're into this, you have 5, 10, 15.
I would quite like a Speciale Aperta.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to pay what they cost now, but as a car, I reckon it would be a great convertible to own.
And I think as a theme of a collection, the lightweight V8s, starting with 348 GTC, a 355 Challenge, a Challenge Stradale, 430 Scuderia, a 16M, a Speciale Aperta, and then obviously a Pista and a Pista Aperta. That's cool. And again, you could probably identify that theme with a colour, every single one in black or something like that. And I like that.
I've fallen asleep at that point.
Yeah, well, okay, there we go. But I do like themes to collections, I think.
It's kind of fun. I think did you sell a while ago, you sold 3 black cars. It's like a Speciale, a 430.
We assembled the collection originally for the guy, and then we sold the Challenge Stradale and the Scuderia, but he still has a Speciale, which is stuff from new.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah. And it was good for him, and he was a lovely guy and was quite new to the cars. Funnily enough, he'd always had one car, and he had a 575, and then he had a 355, and then one day he just was like, right, let's put this together, and then he had an F40 and a Lusso and all sorts of really good cars, and really got into the 60s at one point. And then
I do think that is cool, actually, seeing like those 3 cars together or whatever.
An assembled,
it's a cool thing.
An assembled collection with a bit of sense behind it. Why have you got to this? As opposed to, there is always a link between all the cars and people's collections, and being able to quickly understand what that link is quite important. And race cars get to that. When you have, well, I've got an F1 car, I've got a Le Mans prototype, I've got a GT1 car, I've got
Group C, whatever.
These are all the different things they did, but it's a similar, I just can't remember the word now, not a talent, but a similar
sort of vein.
Thinking.
Yeah. Cool.
So there we go.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. It's been
Pleasure.
good. It's been good to have a little look around and see what's going on. And
I hope everyone's happy. And I apologise to Lamborghini. It's just my personal thing.
Yeah. Well, this is what it is. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks very much.
Yep.
Cheers.
Cheers. 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 Yep.
Cheers.